The holograms of alien council members recoiled in horror and revulsion as Commander Samuel Allen of Earth recounted humanity's blood-soaked history of total warfare, planetary genocide, and nuclear holocaust. An oppressive silence filled the grand council chambers of the Sheliak homeworld, while Samuel, humanity's most ferocious and battle-hardened commander, took the central podium to defend mankind's ascension to the galactic stage. The atmosphere was tense and hostile, as if the slighted honor of 1,000 ancient star empires hung in the balance. Humans have waged more wars in our scant centuries of civilization than all of your noble council races in the last 100 millennia, boomed the grizzled commander, his voice unwavering. The Sheliak ambassador Orin, acting as council leader, called the emergency meeting to order. His insectoid face contorted with what could only be disgust as he addressed the commander. Your kind jeopardizes the very stability our galactic council has maintained for eons. History has shown that left unchecked, warmongers like you will bring only destruction and chaos as your wars spread like a cancer across the stars. I submit that humanity is too unpredictable, too volatile to join our enlightened union as an equal member. A chorus of agreement rang out from the assembled alien dignitaries, their luminous eyes glaring at Samuel with suspicion and contempt. The commander returned their gaze unflinchingly, his battle-scarred hands clasped behind his back in a stance of military dignity. He proceeded to lay humanity's bloody history bare before the council. Tales of sprawling world wars that consumed millions of lives. Weapons that scourged entire cities in cleansing nuclear fire. Brutal conquests of the solar system as man fled the polluted husk of Earth. Samuel held nothing back, revealing the unfathomable scale and savagery of human conflicts that forged his species into hardened survivors. Gasps of disbelief and muttering permeated the council audience. Many were visibly unsettled to learn the unvarnished truth of humanity's past. Samuel sensed their mounting unease and pressed his point. Yes, we have known nothing but war for generations. But those same wars taught us to fight with unmatched skill, tenacity, and innovation. When hostile aliens threatened our fledgling colonies, it was our battle-hardened fleets and armies that cast them back into the void. Orin scoffed openly, his mandibles clicking in derision. You would have us believe that this penchant for reckless aggression is an asset, that we should welcome an unpredictable rogue element into our millennia of peace and stability. I think not, Commander. Shouts of assent rose from the gathered council members, many standing in outrage, demanding sanctions or outright quarantine of human space. Samuel stood firm against the alien onslaught, knowing that the survival of mankind hinged on this fateful moment. Just then, an ashen-faced Sheliak aide burst into the council chamber and rushed to Orin's side, whispering frantically. The ambassador listened, his compound eyes widening in shock. He called the assembly to attention, his voice trembling. An unknown alien battle fleet has just entered council space. Their trajectory puts them on course to assault our most heavily populated worlds. Projections show they will overwhelm our defenses in a matter of days. A grim smile crossed Samuel's weathered face. He had been waiting for this moment. It seems you have need of humanity's penchant for aggression after all, Ambassador. My battle group can be there in 48 hours. Grant me access to your war room and fleet deployments. Mankind will show you how we deal with threats to our allies. The council erupted into frenzied deliberation, fear and indecision plain in their alien faces. Orin silenced the cacophony with an authoritative click of his claws. He turned to Samuel, resentment and reluctant acceptance etched in his features. Very well, Commander Allen. The Council provisionally grants you command of our military response. But be warned, should you fail or exceed your authority, there will be dire consequences for you and your race. Samuel simply nodded, already striding from the chamber to rally his forces, the fate of the galaxy resting in his battle-scarred hands. As the council chamber emptied, Samuel wasted no time. He strode through the gleaming corridors of the Sheliak Citadel, his mind racing with strategies and contingencies. Tapping his comm link, he hailed Admiral Nadia Ivanova aboard the Terran flagship, the TDS Indomitable. Admiral, this is Commander Allen. We have a situation. Assemble our best pilots, marines, and strategists. I want the Terran Defense Fleet's most advanced warships ready to deploy within the hour. Understood, Commander, Ivanova replied, her voice steady and resolute. I'll have our elite strike force mobilized and awaiting your command. Samuel entered the Council's war room, a vast chamber lined with holographic displays and bustling with alien military personnel. Oren stood at the center, his compound eyes fixated on a glowing star map. The Sheliak ambassador gestured for Samuel to join him, begrudgingly granting access to the Council's intelligence network. Immersing himself in the data streaming across the screens, Samuel studied the approaching enemy fleet. The ships were unlike anything he had encountered before. Massive, heavily armored behemoths dripping with devastating energy weapons. The readings confirmed his worst fears. The invading force belonged to a previously unknown alien race called the Zorgax. Conventional tactics won't work against these Zorgax, Samuel muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. We need to find a weakness, something we can exploit. Collaborating with Sheliak and human scientists, Samuel pored over the data, searching for any vulnerability in the Zorgax ship's defenses. Hours turned into days as the team worked tirelessly, running simulations and analyzing every scrap of intelligence. Finally, a breakthrough emerged, a potential flaw in the Zorgax shield technology. If we can develop a specialized weapon, something that can penetrate their shields, we might stand a chance, Samuel explained to the exhausted but determined scientists. However, manufacturing the weapon required rare materials found only on a handful of Council worlds that were now in the path of the advancing Zorgax fleet. Time was running out. Samuel dispatched human strike teams to secure the necessary resources, each squad handpicked for their skill and tenacity. On one mission, Lieutenant Marcus Reeves led his team deep into a hostile jungle world, the planet's savage fauna and treacherous terrain proving almost as deadly as the Zorgax ground forces they encountered. Reeves and his squad fought their way through the dense undergrowth, the air thick with the screams of alien predators and the sizzle of energy weapons. Zorgax soldiers, their armor a mottled green and brown camouflage, emerged from the shadows, determined to sabotage the human efforts. "Keep pushing forward," Reeves shouted over the chaos, his rifle spitting bursts of plasma fire. "We can't let these bastards stop us." As the human teams battled across the galaxy, securing the precious materials, Council and human engineers worked frantically to construct the new weapon. In the Council's war room, Samuel coordinated with military leaders from a dozen alien races, devising a multi-pronged strategy to draw the Zorgax into a trap. The plan was risky, but it was their only hope. The human fleet, bolstered by Council reinforcements, would engage the Zorgax in a series of feints and hit-and-run attacks, luring them closer to the Council's capital world. There, the trap would be sprung, and the secret weapon unleashed. Tensions mounted as the Zorgax fleet entered the Council's core systems, their ships casting ominous shadows across the stars. Samuel stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical displays with an unyielding commitment. "All ships, this is Commander Allen," he broadcast across the fleet. "Engage the enemy, but remember the plan. We draw them in, then hit them with everything we've got." The battle erupted in a storm of fire and fury, human and Council ships darting and weaving amidst the lumbering Zorgax vessels. The human fleet, more maneuverable and adaptable than their Council counterparts, struck swift and hard, but the Zorgax's superior firepower took a heavy toll. Explosions bloomed in the void, ships spinning away, trailing debris and venting atmosphere. Samuel gritted his teeth as the Indomitable shuddered under a barrage of enemy fire, alarms wailing throughout the ship. "Hold the line!" he roared, his eyes blazing with the thrill of battle. "We just need to get them a little closer." With the Zorgax fleet bearing down on the Council's capital world, Samuel knew the time had come. He gave the order, and the human ships peeled away, drawing the enemy into range of the waiting trap. "Now!" Samuel shouted, his voice echoing across the fleet. "All ships, fire the secret weapon!" In a blinding flash of light, the human vessels unleashed a devastating volley, the specialized weapons tearing through the Zorgak's shields as if they were paper. The enemy flagship, a monstrous vessel that dwarfed even the Indomitable, shuddered and lurched, its hull breached and venting plasma. Seizing the opportunity, Samuel led a desperate boarding action, his Marines cutting their way through the crippled Zorgak's ship. They fought deck by deck, corridor by corridor, the air thick with the stench of ozone and burning flesh. At last, Samuel stood face to face with the Zorgak's commander, a towering alien with cold, merciless eyes. The two leaders circled each other, weapons drawn, as the fate of humanity and all alien species hung in the balance. "Why?" Samuel demanded, his voice raw with exhaustion and anger. "Why this invasion? Why the slaughter of innocent worlds?" The Zorgak's commander laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the ruined bridge. "Foolish human, we have been driven from our home galaxy by a threat beyond your comprehension. We seek to conquer this territory, to establish a new empire, and your counsel stands in our way." Samuel's eyes narrowed, the implications of the alien's words sinking in. If the Zorgaks, with all their terrible power, had been forced to flee their own galaxy, what horrors must lurk beyond the Council's borders? The two leaders clashed in a brutal duel, energy blades flashing and sparking as they fought for dominance. Around them, the Zorgak's flagship shuddered and groaned, the sounds of battle and destruction ringing through the halls. With a final, desperate lunge, Samuel drove his blade through the Zorgak's commander's chest, the alien's eyes widening in shock and pain. As the commander slumped to the deck, the fight drained from the remaining Zorgak soldiers, their will to resist shattered by the loss of their leader. In the aftermath of the battle, Samuel stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as the remnants of the Zorgak's fleet fled back into the void. The Council races, once skeptical of humanity's role, now hailed the Terran forces as saviors, their expertise and bravery having turned the tide against an unstoppable foe. But even as the celebrations began, Samuel couldn't shake the sense of unease that gnawed at his gut. The Zorgak's commander's final words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder that the galaxy was far from safe. In the council chambers, Samuel met with Orin and the other leaders, the weight of the future bearing down on them all. They had won the day, but at what cost? And what new threats lurked beyond the horizon, waiting to test the fragile alliance between humanity and the council races? As Samuel looked out at the stars, he knew that the struggle was far from finished. The Zorgaks had been just the beginning, a harbinger of the challenges to come. But with humanity and the council standing together, united in purpose and drive, there was still hope. Hope for a future where the galaxy could be free from the specter of war and destruction. The path ahead would be long and fraught with peril, but Samuel stood ready to face whatever the universe had in store. For the sake of all sentient life, he would fight, and he would never surrender. The alliance between humanity and the Council would be the key to unlocking a new era of peace and prosperity, and Samuel would do whatever it took to see that vision realized. The dust had barely settled from the Zorgak's conflict when Samuel found himself thrust into a new role. The Galactic Council, still reeling from the near catastrophe, recognized the value of human military expertise. In a historic move, Orin proposed the creation of a joint task force to investigate the ominous threat the Zorgaks had hinted at. Samuel stood before the council, his weathered face set with purpose. "I accept this responsibility," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We must uncover the truth behind the Zorgaks' claims." Beside him stood General Vortix, a Sheliak warrior with a reputation for tactical brilliance. The alien's compound eyes fixed on Samuel, mandibles clicking in what passed for a Sheliak nod of respect. "Commander Allen," Vortix said, his translator rendering the clicks and chirps into crisp English. "I look forward to working with you. Our peoples have much to learn from each other." Together they assembled their team, a Krexnar codebreaker with tentacles that could interface directly with alien computer systems, a Vulcan scout whose natural camouflage abilities made her nearly invisible, an Ixalan xenobiologist, expert in analyzing alien physiology and technology. Their first mission took them to the edge of known space. The task force's ship, a sleek vessel combining the best of human and council technology, slipped through the void towards a remote Zorgax outpost. "Stealth systems engaged," reported Lieutenant Zhang, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We're approaching the outpost now." Samuel nodded, tension coiling in his gut. "Prepare for insertion. Remember, we're here for intel, not a firefight." The team deployed, using personal cloaking devices to infiltrate the sprawling Zorgax facility. Samuel led the way, his experienced eyes scanning for threats as they made their way to the central data hub. Inside, the Krexenar codebreaker went to work, its tentacles interfacing with Zorgax computers. Data streamed across holographic displays, painting a grim picture. "By the void," Vortex breathed, mandibles quivering. "It's worse than we imagined." The intel revealed a terrifying truth. The Zorgax were mere refugees, fleeing an unstoppable force known as the Cortex Dominion. This alien empire had conquered entire galaxies, assimilating technology and enslaving populations on a scale beyond comprehension. Back on the Council homeworld, Samuel and Vortex presented their findings. "The Cortex Dominion is real," Samuel declared, his voice grave. "And they're coming for us next." Holograms flickered to life, showing the extent of Cortex conquests. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. "We must act now," Vortex urged. "Fortify our defenses, develop new weapons. The Cortex are unlike anything we've faced before." But even as Samuel and Vortex pushed for immediate action, voices of dissent rose from the Council. "Perhaps diplomacy is still an option," suggested a Tellarite ambassador. "We shouldn't rush to war." Samuel's fist slammed down on the podium. "With all due respect, Ambassador, you didn't see what we saw. The Cortex don't negotiate, they conquer." Debate raged for hours, but Samuel knew they couldn't afford inaction. He proposed a bold plan, a covert mission into Cortex territory itself. "It's risky," he admitted, "but we need to know exactly what we're up against." The mission was greenlit. Using experimental stealth tech, Samuel's team penetrated deep into Cortex space. What they found chilled them to the core. Slave worlds stretched as far as the eye could see, populations toiling under the merciless watch of Cortex overseers. Massive shipyards churned out vessels of terrifying power. It was a war machine built to consume galaxies. In a heart-stopping moment, Samuel and Vortex infiltrated a Cortex command center. As alien data scrolled across their visors, the true scope of the threat became clear. "They're not just coming," Samuel whispered. "They're already here." A detailed invasion plan revealed the Cortex's intentions. Within months, they would launch an all-out assault on Council space. With precious intel in hand, the team fled Cortex territory, narrowly evading patrols of ships that dwarfed even the largest Council vessels. Back in Council space, there was no more room for debate. The evidence was irrefutable. The Council granted Samuel and Vortex unprecedented authority to prepare for war. As the grim work of fortifying the galaxy began, Samuel couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. They faced an enemy beyond imagination, with the fate of every free world hanging in the balance. He looked out at the stars, knowing that soon they would be filled with the flames of war. But humanity had faced extinction before and survived. With the Council at their side, perhaps they stood a chance against even the Cortex Dominion. Samuel's mind focused with grim purpose. The real fight was just beginning. Samuel stood before the Galactic Council, his face etched with the gravity of the situation. "We face an enemy unlike any we've encountered before," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "But together we can prevail." The council chambers buzzed with activity as representatives from every race worked tirelessly to coordinate their efforts. Samuel and Vortex moved from station to station, overseeing the mobilization of forces and the development of new technologies. In a vast hangar, human and alien engineers labored side by side, putting the finishing touches on a prototype energy shield. Samuel watched as they activated the system, a shimmering barrier of energy springing to life around a test vessel. "Fire the particle beam," he ordered. A blinding flash of light struck the shield, which flickered but held firm. The engineers erupted in cheers, but Samuel's face remained grim. He knew they'd need every advantage they could get. Across the galaxy, Council fleets moved into position. Samuel stood on the bridge of the newly christened HSS Defiant, its hull gleaming with the latest armor plating. He turned to Vortex, who clicked his mandibles in anticipation. "The outposts are ready," Vortex reported. "We'll have early warning of any Cortex incursion." Samuel nodded, then hesitated. "We can't just wait for them to strike," he said. "We need to hit them first, throw them off balance." Vortex's compound eyes narrowed. "A preemptive strike? That's risky, Samuel." "I know," Samuel replied, pulling up holographic displays of Cortex territory. "But look at this intel our recon teams gathered. Their main staging area. If we can hit it, we might buy ourselves months." After hours of debate, Vortex finally agreed. The strike force assembled in secret, a mix of human and Sheliak ships outfitted with experimental stealth technology. As they approached Cortex space, Samuel felt his heart racing. "All ships maintain radio silence," he ordered. "We've got one shot at this." The mission went off without a hitch, at first. They slipped past Cortex patrols and launched a devastating assault on the shipyards. But as Samuel led a team to plant charges on a fuel depot, they stumbled upon something far worse than they'd imagined. "Dear God," Samuel breathed, staring at the research facility before them. "They're weaponizing a plague." With time running out, Samuel made a snap decision. "Change of plans," he barked into his comm. "We're hitting that lab. Move!" The battle that followed was chaos. Samuel's team fought their way through waves of Cortex defenders, the air thick with energy bolts, and the screams of the wounded. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility. There, Samuel came face to face with Zarthok, the Cortex commander. The alien scientist loomed over him, tentacles writhing. "You have no idea what you're meddling with, human," Zarthok hissed. Samuel raised his weapon. "Oh, I think I do." What followed was a battle of both mind and body. Zarthok was brilliant, anticipating Samuel's moves, but the human's combat training gave him an edge. In the end, Samuel stood victorious, Zarthok restrained, and the plague samples secured. As they fled the Cortex staging area, explosions blooming behind them, Samuel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but it was short-lived. The Defiant's sensors lit up with incoming Cortex ships. "All vessels, evasive maneuvers," Samuel shouted. "Get us out of here!" They limped back to Council space, their numbers diminished, but their mission accomplished. Samuel knew the cost had been high, but the intelligence they'd gained might just turn the tide. In the days that followed, Zarthok's interrogation revealed crucial details about Cortex capabilities. But before they could fully process the information, alarms blared across the Council's communication channels. "Multiple Cortex incursions detected," a frantic voice reported. "They're hitting our outer defenses hard." Samuel and Vortex sprang into action, coordinating the Council's response. As reports flooded in of devastating Cortex attacks, they implemented their contingency plans. "Deploy the shielded ships to Sector 7, Samuel ordered. "Use hit-and-run tactics. Don't let them pin you down." The battle raged across multiple fronts, Council forces holding the line against seemingly overwhelming odds. Samuel watched the tactical displays, his mind racing as he sought any advantage. "There," he shouted, pointing to a weak spot in the Cortex formation. "Concentrate fire on that cruiser. If we can punch through, we can disrupt their whole attack pattern." The gambit worked, and slowly but surely, the Council's defenses began to push back the Cortex assault. As the enemy retreated, Samuel allowed himself a small smile. They'd weathered the first storm, but he knew it was only the beginning. In the war room, Samuel and Vortex pored over reports and strategic projections. The full-scale Cortex invasion was coming, and they needed to be ready. "We've proven we can stand against them," Vortex said, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "But can we win?" Samuel's eyes hardened with grit. "We have to," he replied. For the sake of every free world in this galaxy, we have to. As they worked, the fate of countless civilizations hung in the balance. The true test of the Samuel Allen stood before the holographic display, his eyes scanning the tactical readouts of the Cortex shipyard system. The massive complex sprawled across several planetoids, its vast production facilities churning out warships and weapons at an alarming rate. "This is it," Samuel said, turning to Vortex. "If we can take out this shipyard, we might just buy ourselves the time we need." Vortex's compound eyes narrowed, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "The defenses are formidable, Samuel. This won't be easy." "When has it ever been?" Samuel replied, a grim smile tugging at his lips. He tapped a control, bringing up detailed schematics of the shipyard's defenses. "We'll need our best for this one." In the days that followed, Samuel and Vortex assembled their strike force. The hangar bay of the HSS Defiant buzzed with activity as human and Sheliak troops prepared for the mission. Samuel watched as Lieutenant Marcus Reeves, a grizzled veteran of the Zorgax campaign, ran his ground team through final equipment checks. "Lieutenant Reeves," Samuel called out, approaching the Marine. "You understand what's at stake here?" Reeves nodded, his scarred face set with intensity. "Yes, sir. We get in, we blow it to hell, we get out, and try not to die in the process." "That's the general idea," Samuel replied, clapping the man on the shoulder. "Good hunting, Lieutenant." As the strike force prepared to depart, Samuel took his place on the Defiance bridge. Vortex stood beside him, the Sheliak's exoskeleton gleaming under the ship's lights. "All ships, this is Commander Allen," Samuel broadcast across the fleet. "You know your objectives. Hit hard, hit fast, and watch each other's backs. Let's remind the Cortex why they should have stayed in their own galaxy." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, emerging on the outskirts of the Cortex system. Almost immediately, alarms blared as enemy ships moved to intercept. "Stealth systems holding," reported the Defiance tactical officer. "They haven't spotted us yet." Samuel leaned forward, his hands gripping the command console. "Launch the ground teams. All ships, prepare to engage on my mark." He watched as the assault shuttles streaked towards the shipyard, their stealth systems rendering them nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. As they neared their target, Samuel gave the order. "All ships, weapons free, give them hell." The space around the shipyard erupted in a furious exchange of weapons fire. Energy beams lanced out from the Council ships, slamming into Cortex vessels and defense platforms. Return fire lit up the void, the Defiant shuddering as its shields absorbed multiple hits. On the surface of the shipyard's main planetoid, Lieutenant Reeves led his team through twisting corridors of alien metal. The sound of distant explosions reverberated through the structure as they fought their way deeper into the complex. "Contact front," shouted one of Reeves's men. A squad of Cortex security drones rounded the corner, their weapons blazing. Reeves dove for cover, his rifle spitting fire as he took down two of the drones in rapid succession. "Push forward," he yelled. "We need to reach that control hub." The team battled through waves of Cortex defenders, using their specialized demolition charges to breach heavily fortified doors and sabotage key systems. As they neared the central hub, Reeves's comm crackled to life. "Ground team, this is Commander Allen. Be advised, we're detecting a massive energy surge in your vicinity. Whatever they're hiding in there, it's big." Reeves acknowledged the warning as his team stacked up outside the final set of blast doors. "Charges set," reported his demolitions expert. "Fire in the hole." The doors blew inward with a thunderous roar. Reeves and his team surged through the opening, weapons at the ready. What they saw inside made them stop in their tracks. Row upon row of massive stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a being unlike anything they'd ever encountered. Muscular frames, enhanced bone structures, skin that seemed to shimmer with some kind of energy-absorbing properties. "My God," Reeves breathed. "They're creating some kind of super soldiers." Before they could fully process what they were seeing, alarms blared throughout the facility. From the far end of the chamber, a group of the enhanced Cortex soldiers emerged from their pods, their eyes locking onto Reeves and his team with predatory focus. "Fall back!" Reeves shouted, opening fire on the advancing super soldiers. His shots seemed to have little effect, the enhanced beings shrugging off hits that would have dropped a normal Cortex warrior. The human and Shellyak forces found themselves in a desperate battle for survival. The super soldiers moved with blinding speed, their enhanced strength allowing them to tear through armor with terrifying ease. Reeves watched in horror as two of his men were ripped apart by a single super soldier. He emptied his rifle into the creature's chest, finally bringing it down, but more were coming. "Commander Allen," Reeves yelled into his comm, "we need immediate evac. They've got some kind of enhanced troops down here. We're getting slaughtered." On the bridge of the Defiant, Samuel's face hardened as he heard Reeves's desperate call. He turned to Vortex, who was already moving towards the hangar bay. "I'm taking a strike team down," Vortex said, his mandibles clicking with grim purpose. "Keep their fleet occupied." Samuel nodded, then returned his attention to the battle raging outside. "All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessel. We need to buy our ground team some time." The space battle intensified as Samuel coordinated a series of lightning strikes against key Cortex targets. On the surface, Vortex and his Shellyak warriors fought their way through the facility, their advanced weaponry finally turning the tide against the super soldiers. As the last of the enhanced Cortex troops fell, Reeves and what remained of his team secured. Samuel stared at the holographic display, his eyes tracing the paths of Cortex incursions across Council space. The losses from the shipyard operation caused great concern on him, the faces of fallen comrades etched in his memory. "We underestimated them," he said, his voice low. "These super soldiers, they're beyond anything we've faced before." Vortex's mandibles clicked in agreement. "The intelligence from the captured scientists is alarming. Their strength, speed, reflexes, all far superior to our own troops." Samuel's fists clenched. "We need to level the playing field. I have a plan, but it's risky." He outlined his proposal to infiltrate the Cortex's main research facility. As he spoke, council leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "The ethical implications of such research," one began. "With all due respect," Samuel cut in, "ethics won't matter if we're all dead. We need this data to survive." Vortex stepped forward. "I support Samuel's plan. The need is dire. We must act now." In the days that followed, a strike team assembled. Human and Shellyak special forces trained alongside scientists and engineers, preparing for the perilous mission ahead. The HSS Shadowhawk, a stealth frigate, slipped silently through Cortex space. On the bridge, Samuel watched stars streak by, his throat tight with tension. "Approaching the target system," the pilot announced. "Cloaking systems holding steady." As they neared the research outpost, Samuel addressed the strike team. "This is our one shot. Get in, get the data, get out. Watch each other's backs." Lieutenant Reeves nodded grimly. "We're ready, sir." The team deployed, their stealth shuttles descending towards the facility. For agonizing minutes, Samuel waited, monitoring their progress. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. "Contact!" Reeves shouted. "Multiple hostiles, including supers." The sounds of furious combat filled the channel. Samuel listened, his face hardened, as the team engaged the Cortex forces. "They're too strong," a panicked voice cried out. "We can't hold them." Samuel turned to Vortex. "We need to give them an opening. Prepare for orbital bombardment." The Shadowhawk's weapon systems came online, targeting the facility's defenses. As the barrage began, Samuel prayed it would be enough. Inside the facility, Dr. Amara Khan worked frantically at a Cortex terminal, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "Almost there," she muttered. "Just a few more seconds." A triumphant beep signaled the data transfer's completion. "We've got it," she exclaimed. But their victory was short-lived. The pounding of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Samuel's voice crackled over the comm. "Khan, get your team to the extraction point now. Reeves, cover their retreat." Samuel and Reeves stood side by side, firing desperately at the advancing super soldiers. Their weapons seemed to barely slow the enhanced warriors. "Go!" Reeves shouted, shoving Samuel towards the escape route. "I'll hold them off." Samuel hesitated, torn between duty and loyalty. In that moment of indecision, a super soldier's blow sent Reeves crashing to the ground. "Marcus!" Samuel cried out, moving to help his friend. Reeves looked up, blood trickling from his mouth. "Complete the mission," he gasped. "Go!" With a heavy heart, Samuel turned and ran, the sounds of combat fading behind him. He barely made it to the shuttle, collapsing into his seat as they lifted off. Back on the Shadowhawk, Samuel watched the facility recede into the distance, his victory hollow. The data was secure, but at a terrible cost. Days later, in a secure lab on a council world, Dr. Khan pored over the stolen research. "The genetic enhancements are incredibly complex," she reported. "It will take time to fully understand them, let alone replicate or counter them." Samuel nodded, his eyes distant. "Time is something we may not have. The Cortex won't take this lying down." As if in answer to his words, alarms blared throughout the facility. A frantic voice came over the intercom. "Multiple Cortex incursions detected. They're deploying super soldiers across our defensive lines." Samuel exchanged a grim look with Vortex. "It's begun," the Sheliak said. "Then we'd better get to work," Samuel replied, striding towards the command center. The real battle for survival was only just beginning. Samuel's eyes scanned the holographic display, tracking the movements of Cortex ships as they closed in on the Vedrax outpost. The air in the command center hummed with tension as personnel rushed to battle stations. "Status report!" Samuel barked, his voice cutting through the noise. Dr. Khan looked up from her console, dark circles under her eyes betraying sleepless nights of research. "The prototype serum is ready, but we need more time to synthesize enough for widespread deployment." Samuel nodded, his eyes sharp. "We'll buy you that time. Vortex, what's the situation on the ground?" The Sheliak's exoskeleton clicked as he turned to face Samuel. "Our defenses are holding, but barely. The Cortex super soldiers are pushing hard on the eastern perimeter." A proximity alarm blared, and Samuel's attention snapped back to the tactical display. "Incoming dropships! They're trying to flank us from the north." He keyed his comms. "All units, be advised. Enemy reinforcements approaching from Vector 030. Redirect anti-air batteries and prepare for close quarters combat." On the outpost surface, Lieutenant Marcus Reeves crouched behind a hastily erected barricade, his augmented muscles tensed for action. The scars on his face stood out starkly against his sweat-streaked skin as he checked his weapon. "Here they come!" shouted a nearby soldier, her voice barely audible over the whine of approaching Cortex engines. Reeves peered through his scope, tracking the first dropship as it swooped low over the rocky terrain. "Wait for it," he muttered to his squad. "Let them get nice and close." The dropship's bay doors opened, disgorging a wave of Cortex super soldiers. Their enhanced bodies moved with inhuman speed and grace as they charged towards the human positions. "Now!" Reeves roared, squeezing his trigger. A hail of weapons fire erupted from the defenders' lines, meeting the Cortex advance head-on. The first wave of attackers stumbled and fell, but more poured out of the dropships to take their place. Reeves ducked as a Cortex energy blast sizzled over his head, leaving a smoking crater in the wall behind him. He popped up, sighting on a particularly large super soldier, and fired a 3-round burst. The rounds impacted with satisfying thuds, dropping the enemy. "They're not invincible," Reeves called out to his troops. "Aim for center mass and keep firing." Inside the outpost, Dr. Khan worked feverishly alongside the Vedrax scientists, their fingers flying over unfamiliar consoles as they raced to produce more of the enhancement serum. Zartok, the Vedrax leader, watched with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Your people fight with great courage," he said, his alien features unreadable. "But courage alone may not be enough against the Cortex onslaught." Khan nodded grimly, not looking up from her work. "That's why we need to finish this. With your enhancements, we might stand a chance." A tremor shook the facility, dust raining down from the ceiling. Khan steadied herself against a workbench, her eyes meeting Zartok's. "We're running out of time." Back in the command center, Samuel coordinated the defense while simultaneously finalizing plans for their counterattack. He pulled up a schematic of the Cortex command ship, identifying key structural weaknesses. "If we can get a team aboard," he explained to Vortex, "we can plant charges here, here, and here. That should be enough to cripple their fleet." Vortex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A bold plan, but how do we get past their defenses? Before Samuel could respond, an urgent transmission crackled over the comms. "Command, this is Reeves. We can't hold them much longer. We need those enhanced troops now." Samuel's fists clenched as he surveyed the battle raging outside. They were caught between two imperatives: defend the outpost long enough to complete the enhancements, or launch their desperate strike against the Cortex command structure. "Dr. Khan," he called over the comms, "what's your status?" "We need 10 more minutes," came the strained reply. "Maybe less if we can boost power to the synthesis chambers." Samuel made his decision. "Vortex, prep our strike team. We launch in 15 minutes with or without the enhancements. It's time to take the fight to the enemy." As alarms blared and troops rushed to their positions, Samuel allowed himself a moment of grim reflection. The next few hours would determine the fate not just of this outpost, but of the entire war against the Cortex Dominion. He checked his own weapon, took a deep breath, and strode towards the hangar bay. The final battle was about to begin. But Samuel knew they needed an edge. In the days following the defense of the Vedrax outpost, he and Vortex worked tirelessly to create a new force that could turn the tide against the Cortex Dominion. Samuel stood before a group of volunteers, human and Sheliak alike, his voice firm as he addressed them. "You've all been briefed on the risks. The enhancements we're about to administer will push your bodies to their limits, but it's our best chance to defeat the Cortex threat." Dr. Khan moved among the volunteers, administering injections of the newly synthesized serum. Samuel watched as the soldiers' bodies tensed, muscles bulging and skin rippling as the genetic enhancements took hold. One of the human soldiers, Private Chen, stumbled forward, gasping. "Sir, I feel—" "Focus, soldier," Samuel said, gripping Chen's shoulder. "Control it. Remember your training." Over the next week, Samuel and Vortex put the newly enhanced soldiers through rigorous drills, honing their newfound abilities. The Vanguard, as they came to be called, displayed incredible strength, speed, and reflexes. During a combat simulation, Samuel watched as Private Chin effortlessly lifted a fallen bulkhead, allowing his squad mates to advance. Nearby, a Sheliak warrior moved with blinding speed, dodging simulated enemy fire with ease. "Impressive," Vortex clicked, his mandibles twitching with satisfaction. "But will it be enough?" Samuel's face hardened. "It has to be. We've just received intel on the location of the Cortex Supreme Leader, Overlord Kalrock. This is our chance to end this war." In the command center, Samuel and Vortex pored over holographic displays of Cortex space. Samuel pointed to a heavily fortified installation orbiting a barren world. "That's where Kalrock is overseeing their next big push into our territory. If we can take him out—" we could cripple their entire command structure," Vortex finished. Samuel nodded. "Exactly, but getting there won't be easy." The Vanguard strike force boarded their stealth frigate, the Shadowhawk, its hull gleaming with adaptive camouflage technology. As they slipped into hyperspace, Samuel addressed the team one last time. "This is it. Everything we've fought for comes down to this mission. Stay sharp, watch each other's backs, and remember, failure is not an option." The journey through Cortex space was fraught with tension. Multiple times they narrowly avoided detection by enemy patrols. In one heart-stopping moment, a Cortex cruiser passed within kilometers of their position, its sensors sweeping the area. "Hold position," Samuel whispered, though there was no need. The entire bridge crew seemed to be holding their breath. Finally, they reached the outskirts of Kalrock's command station. The massive structure loomed before them, filled with weaponry and surrounded by a defensive fleet. Samuel turned to Vortex. "Time for Phase 2, you ready?" The Sheliak warrior's exoskeleton gleamed as he checked his weapons. "Always." Samuel keyed the ship-wide comm. All Vanguard units, prepare for combat drop. Dr. Khan, you and the Vedrax elders will follow in the second wave. Good luck, everyone. See you on the other side. As the Shadowhawk's bay doors opened, revealing the void of space and the imposing Cortex station beyond, Samuel took a deep breath. This was it. The fate of humanity and all alien species hung in the balance, and he was about to lead the charge into the heart of enemy territory. This was it. The fate of humanity and all allied species hung in the balance as Samuel led the charge into the heart of enemy territory. The Shadowhawk's stealth systems held as they approached Overlord Kalrock's command station. Samuel's heart pounded as he watched the massive structure grow larger on the interface. Cortex ships patrolled nearby, oblivious to their presence. "Vanguard teams, prepare for deployment," Samuel ordered, his voice steady despite the tension. He turned to Vortex, the Sheliak's exoskeleton glinting in the low light. "Ready?" Vortex clicked his mandibles. "Always." The Vanguard soldiers moved with fluid grace as they entered the drop pods. Their enhanced bodies, honed through grueling training, were primed for action. Private Chen flexed his augmented muscles, a mix of excitement and nerves evident on his face. "Remember your training," Samuel said, locking eyes with each soldier. "We hit fast, we hit hard, and we don't stop until we have Kalrock." The drop pods launched, streaking silently through space towards the command station. Samuel's pod shuddered as it penetrated the station's outer defenses. With a bone-jarring impact, it breached the hull. Samuel burst from the pod, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to take in the scene in a fraction of a second. Cortex guards, caught off guard, scrambled for their weapons. Samuel's rifle barked, downing two before they could react. Vortex emerged from his pod in a blur of motion, his chitinous arms lashing out to incapacitate a nearby guard. Private Chen and the other Vanguard soldiers fanned out, securing the breach point with ruthless efficiency. "Move!" Samuel ordered, leading the charge deeper into the station. They encountered heavy resistance as they fought their way towards the command center. Cortex super soldiers engaged them in close-quarters combat, their enhanced strength matching that of the Vanguard. Samuel grappled with a particularly large Cortex warrior, the two enhanced combatants locked in a deadly struggle. With a surge of effort, Samuel managed to overpower his opponent, slamming him into a bulkhead. "Status report," Samuel barked into his comm as he caught his breath. "We've breached the lower levels," Reeves' voice crackled back. "Heavy resistance, but we're pushing through." "Copy that. Keep the pressure on." They fought their way through winding corridors and sealed blast doors, the station's alarms blaring incessantly. Finally, they reached the command center's outer defenses. "Dr. Khan, we need that override now," Samuel shouted into his comm. "Working on it," came the strained reply. "Their systems are... Got it." The massive doors to the command center slid open with a hiss. Samuel and his team surged forward, weapons at the ready. Inside, they found Overlord Kalrock surrounded by his elite guard. The Cortex leader's alien features twisted in a snarl of defiance. "Surrender, Kalrock," Samuel demanded, his rifle trained on the Overlord. "It's over." Kalrock's eyes darted around the room, assessing his options. With a grudging nod, he raised his hands in surrender. As Vanguard soldiers secured Kalrock and his command staff, Samuel allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had captured the Cortex leader. But Samuel knew this was just the beginning. With Kalrock in custody, they now had access to vital intelligence that could turn the tide of the war. "Vortex," Samuel called. "Gather every scrap of data from their systems. We need to move fast." The Sheliak warrior nodded, already interfacing with the Cortex computers. "I'm accessing their strategic database now. Samuel, you need to see this." Samuel joined Vortex at the main console, his eyes widening as he took in the information scrolling across the screen. The location of Cortex shipyards, staging grounds, supply lines, it was all there. "This is it," Samuel breathed. "This is how we end this war." He turned to address the Vanguard teams, his voice filled with newfound purpose. Listen up. We got the intel we need to take the fight to the Cortex. It's time to rally our forces and launch a counteroffensive. As the vanguard secured their prisoners and prepared for extraction, Samuel's mind raced with possibilities. They had a chance now, a real chance to strike at the heart of the Cortex Dominion and end their threat once and for all. Vortex, Samuel said, turning to his alien comrade, we need to coordinate with the Council. It's time to plan our next move. The Sheliak clicked in agreement. Indeed, the Cortex will not expect us to strike so soon after this operation. Samuel nodded, a grim smile playing across his lips. Exactly. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we don't stop until they're driven from our space. As they made their way back to the Shadowhawk, prisoners in tow, Samuel felt a surge of hope. The tide was turning. With the combined might of humanity and their allies, bolstered by their new enhancements, they had a fighting chance. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time since the Cortex invasion began, Samuel allowed himself to believe they could win. Samuel stood at the viewport of the Council's flagship, his eyes scanning the stars. The recent victory over the Cortex Dominion felt hollow as he watched construction drones rebuild a shattered colony world below. Vortex approached, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking softly on the deck plates. The rebuilding proceeds as planned, Samuel, but I sense your unease. Samuel nodded, his face etched with weariness. We won the war, old friend, but at what cost? Before Vortex could respond, an urgent transmission crackled over the comm. Commander Allen, this is Scout Ship Horizon. We've found something. You need to see this. Samuel's spine stiffened. What is it, Horizon? Sir, we've discovered a hidden Cortex facility on an uncharted world in the Outer Rim. It looks abandoned, but there's data here. A lot of it. Samuel exchanged a glance with Vortex. Secure the site. We're on our way. Hours later, Samuel touched down on the barren world, leading a team that included Lieutenant Marcus Reeves and Dr. Amara Khan. The facility loomed before them, a fortress of stark angles and cold metal. Stay alert, Samuel ordered as they entered the complex. We don't know what we're walking into. The interior was a maze of shadowed corridors and silent laboratories. Equipment lay strewn about, as if the occupants had fled in a hurry. Dr. Khan moved to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. Samuel, she called, her voice tight. You need to see this. He joined her, peering at the screen. His blood ran cold as he absorbed the information. My God, he whispered. What have they done? Reeves's voice echoed from an adjacent chamber. Sir, in here. Samuel rushed to join him, stopping short at the threshold. The room was filled with stasis pods, each containing a partially transformed figure. Human and alien bodies alike, twisted and melded with cybernetic components. Dr. Khan pushed past, her face pale as she examined the nearest pod. They've been experimenting on Council civilians, she said, her voice shaking. Combining Vedrak's genetic enhancements with cybernetic implants. These hybrids, they're beyond anything we've seen before. Samuel's fists clenched. Download everything you can, he ordered. We're taking this to the Council. Days later, Samuel and Vortex stood before the assembled Galactic Council, presenting their findings. The chamber erupted into chaos as the full scope of the Cortex atrocities became clear. This cannot stand, roared a Vedrak's elder. We must act now. But before a consensus could be reached, alarms blared throughout the chamber. A harried aide burst in, his face ashen. Counselors, we're under attack. Unknown vessels are striking our outer colonies. Samuel turned to the view screen, watching in horror as a swarm of sleek, predatory ships tore through the Council's defenses. Who are they? He demanded. They call themselves the Ravagers, the aide replied, and they're not stopping. As the Council scrambled to mount a defense, Samuel's comm unit chimed. It was Dr. Khan. Samuel, she said, her voice tight with urgency. I've found something in the Cortex data. The Ravagers. They're not working alone. They've made a deal with what's left of the Cortex Dominion. Samuel's blood ran cold. He turned to Vortex, seeing his own dread mirrored in the Shiliak's compound eyes. The war, it seemed, was a long way to go. "We need a plan," Samuel said, his mind racing. "Something to hit them hard and fast before they can use this Cortex tech." Vortex nodded, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "A strike team," he suggested. "Our best augmented soldiers, targeting their facilities directly." Samuel turned back to the council, still arguing amongst themselves. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din. "Counselors," he said, his tone brooking no argument, "I have a proposal." The chamber fell silent as Samuel laid out his plan. A covert team, operating outside official channels to hunt down and eliminate the remaining Cortex threat. It was a dangerous gambit, but as the reports of Ravager attacks continued to pour in, the council had little choice. After hours of heated debate, they granted Samuel the authority he needed. As he left the chamber, his mind was already assembling his team. Reeves, Khan, the best of the vanguard.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.